AM 1460 WXBR, Peter Zimborn and Mike Pava here with you on the Metro South Morning Show. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at PM in the AM Boston. Subscribe to us on YouTube at youtube.com/PM in the AM Boston. That's where you can find a lot of archived interviews and segments from this program. We've been discussing the Boston Marathon bombings, the suspects involved, and the incidents of Friday in Watertown throughout the morning here on the program. And now we have someone who was an eyewitness to many of the incidents taking place Friday afternoon in Watertown. He is a Watertown firefighter and a Watertown resident. He's also a very noteworthy mixed martial arts referee who you may have seen in the UFC before, and all around a good guy, Kevin Macdonald. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
Hey, thanks, Pete. No problem.
Kevin, let's talk about Friday. How did the day start for you? Take us in order of what happened chronologically from your perspective.
Oh, my experience this Friday, I got a call from the reverse 911 auto dial saying, don't leave the house. I had gone to bed a little early that night and saying, don't leave the house at about 3 in the morning. And so immediately my wife and I put the TV on to see what's going on, and we kind of get a quick glimpse. So frightening, I look out my window. I'm within the 20-block containment zone where my family lives here. And I see there was, some PD down the end of the street. So, I went down and spoke with them and stayed with them for about an hour, watching the way things went. And it was the police presence was mind-blowing. And I come back to the house, got about an hour and a half of sleep, and then I got called in to work because they beefed up the staffing for Friday during the day. And it was surreal. I was on an ambulance for the fire department, so as we were responding to calls, we were obviously allowed to be out and about on the roads. And to see the town that I grew up in from the day I was born, and to see Humvees, task forces, thousands and thousands of law enforcement, so many different feelings wash over you throughout the day. It was wild.
Now, it's interesting that a lot of people were told not to go into work on that morning because of what was happening in Watertown and perhaps surrounding communities, but you're a firefighter in Watertown. You're a member of the public safety force. It was your duty to do so.
Absolutely. Yep. And it leading up to it was even, generally we always go into the marathon, and this year we didn't because my wife had volunteered me to pick my aunt up at the airport, and that was sure enough at like 2:50. So I have the whole family in the car. We're at the airport. I start getting text messages, are you okay, are you okay, are you and the kids okay? But I can't hear any radio because I'm down in the tunnel after having picked up. So I come up on a store drive just to see people running by. And so that was how we started that whole week. But then we get up to, on Friday when I go into work. And it was, what I was so impressed with was just, you always see in the movies or hear on TV, like agencies fighting with each other or this, that, the other thing. And I didn't see anything remotely like that. I saw every single agency was dead focused on finding these guys. I saw citizens who, you hear some people and you see talk on Facebook, and especially up here in Boston, it's pretty liberal stuff like that. And you're waiting to hear people like, well, I can go outside the house because you are not enforcing martial law. No, everybody said, you know what, you guys do what you got to do, and so people stayed in. They talked to each other on the phone. They did things online. They did whatever, and everybody. There was response teams going. It was awesome. When things really changed for me was I come home. I got relieved at 6. I came home, and there was a part of me that was heartbroken because here when I left at 6 in the morning, I go downstairs, I clear my basement, I make sure everything's okay. I lock up the house. I hear my son, 7 years old. He's usually wakes up first besides me, and I hear him. He's got the dog on the leash. He's got his boots on. He's going outside to walk the dog. I have to tell him, you can't go outside. You can't walk the dog. Well, why not? So I give him a little watered-down version, but then that translates immediately into, well, you're in your firefighting clothes, what? So I come home after the shift, and I know my kids had been upset, and my wife had been very nervous. And again, there were incidents throughout the day that happened, within 3 blocks of my house. So then I come home. I'm sad because the state police had just sort of said, hey, we're going to back off on this. Guys had started sort of going home. It felt kind of like a failure. And I come home, I see my kids, I'm so happy. Then I start seeing helicopters buzzing over the house and everything, real close, real low. We go out to walk the dog because the governor has now rescinded the stay inside order. And we go outside. We're not 15 steps from my house. And 3 blocks away, I hear it sounds like someone just lights off a case of fireworks. And you know the sound, So it's like, nope, right back into the house, kids. And we put on the TV, we put on the scanners. We heard everything going down. I went out on my front porch. I could hear the flashbangs going. And then I heard job well done over the scanner. And at that point, it was just such a relief. Because when I came home at 6, my son one of them was waiting on the steps, and he's all excited. And I say, hey, you got to be inside. He's like, no, they caught the bad guys. And I'm like, no, we didn't. But then we walked 2 blocks down to Arsenal Street where the command post was, and the entire town turned out. They lined the streets. They were cheering. It was just, talk about every emotion going through it.
Once again, we're chatting with Kevin Macdonald here on AM 1460, firefighter and resident of Watertown, Massachusetts, where everything went down in regards to the Boston Marathon suspect who eventually was captured Friday night. Kevin, during the time period when this manhunt was ongoing for this particular suspect and police seemingly were going door to door, house to house, trying to find him, what was your participation on the law enforcement side? You're a firefighter, not a cop, I understand, but you're involved with public safety nevertheless. And what was your experiences with them perhaps checking out your house?
Actually never got that far because they were looking in one specific neighborhood. My aunt was one of the homes that was searched, and I was called in to staff a second ambulance because our primary rescue unit, our ambulance, and one of the engines was brought down to Command Central. So they were tied up there all day. So I was on an ambulance that was designed to respond to any of the citizens that had problems or any of that. So we were just bringing people to and from the hospital because when there's no driving and there's no, some people still need to get transported.
You mentioned... I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. As far as the other, as far as what I was seeing with the, quote searches, it wasn't what some people might try to make it out to be. It was more like my aunt's experience was. Agents showed up. She couldn't tell me whether they were stateies, whether they were local, whatever. But she said from the time everything started, because she was on Dexter Ave, she said there were 2 men in full gear on her front porch making sure she was safe. And when they were going by from house to house, it was basically people stepping up and saying, hey, look, are you sure your house is clear? Is everything okay? And everyone I spoke to, the citizens were like, we think we're okay, but we'd like you to do a sweep. So it was people just complying and communicating. There was no general orders. There was no any of this kind of stuff that obviously some websites and all are going to try to, make the case because that always happens. But it was just people working together trying to find this guy.
At the height of this on Friday, many people turned to, as you mentioned before, the police scanners. And there was a point in time where officials were telling the public not to be broadcasting the whereabouts in order not to hinder the investigation. What are your thoughts on the police scanners and being a public use? Do you think they hinder or help?
I couldn't tell you because I have a lot of people who, I'm on the fire department. So, there's some guys that eat, sleep, and drink the fire department, and when they're not on duty, they're, listening to the scanner all the time, and there's citizens that do that. And I'll tell you, the only way I'm a NASCAR fan. So I have a scanner for when I go to the track so I can listen to the broadcast. Friday night was the only time I'm looking online. I tried to find the code and get it typed in, and I did just before the end of the event. So I'm not a scanner person. I'm not I think like any, free information, there's going to be some people that, may abuse it. There's going to be some people that, are just very interested. I know Ranger Up, the MMA company, they got something going on the UG, on the underground, because I heard from lots of my friends where they were second by second updating people around the country. And, I think it's super cool when you live in the information age that you potentially can access this. As far as it impeding any investigations, in this day and age, you've got, everyone has a cell phone and a GPS and a transmitter, and I don't think you can really lock things out. And I think if people are going to, it would be more, again, when they said to the news cameras, hey, please don't show this family that we're talking to right now, because that's going to show where our location is. And the news cameras were like, absolutely, and they turned away, and then they explained why they turned away. So I don't think people have a problem with it. And I think it potentially can help. If you see something on there where, this guy was spotted here, here, and here, well, to a lot of folks that don't live in town, that doesn't make any sense. When you live in town, it's like, wow, this is the right direction he's heading.
AM 1460 WXBR, we're chatting with Kevin Macdonald, a Watertown resident and firefighter, talking about the events of this past Friday. Chronologically, we got to the point where you came home at about 6 o'clock that night when there was an all clear for people to go outside. Shortly thereafter, you heard the gunfire and whatnot between police officials and the suspect at large, who we ultimately found out was hiding underneath a boat in someone's backyard. Where were you when they ultimately surrounded him, captured him, and what were your experiences?
I was off duty at the time, so I heard the gunfire. I went in. I had the online feed going. I had a scanner and I had the television. And then once I heard that they had him, like you could just hear in the voices. And it was just joy. Going from, and with my wife being a nurse at Brigham and Women's, she's treating the people because she's on a trauma floor. She's treating the people that got exposed. So we were there, technically in the area for the bombing. She's treating the patients there. It's in our town. We're in the lockdown. So you go through every possible emotion, and then to hear that they got this guy after you think they didn't. And, what made it even more special for me was knowing that Watertown PD was involved throughout. This wasn't one of those where, I went to school with the kid who they initially fired on Upland Road. It was schoolmates and classmates who were in the 200-plus round shootout with this guy, 6 blocks from my house. And there's just something, as crazy as it is, there's something so cool about everybody kind of looking at each other, and it's like, wow, how many people would actually have the chance to take part in defending their town? Not just responding to a call or anything like that, but just being involved. So it was, it was cool. And when you see all the Watertown Strong stuff and everything, it was awesome seeing everybody work together.
It's been reported that officials went in and scooped the suspect up after a period of time, and there wasn't really too much of a fight once they went in to capture the suspect, and a wave of applause and adulation was felt throughout the community upon his capture. Is there anything about his capture, any unique stories that only someone within Watertown like yourself would know that hasn't been widespreadly recently reported in the media that you'd like to share with us? Anything cool? Like you said, there was people you knew directly involved.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, still at this point, there's so much that people don't know, and until everyone places, is able to place things out, like I didn't know myself that there were 2 cars involved in the initial. I didn't know that they had taken this guy to an ATM, to 3 different ATMs to try to get money out. Like all your initial thing is like, it's the bombers. They are in your town and they just got in a firefight with all the guys that you know. And there's one story that's coming out right now, and you can see it on the WatertownPatch.com, and I'm so glad that it did because it's some real good friends of mine. And it just explains how the, while this gun battle was going on, 2 close friends of mine who were on the department with me, we went to the academy together, they drove the ambulance right into the live firefight because the MBTA police officer went down, and he suffered an injury which was as severe as it gets. And they jump right into action, grab the guy, get him in the back, no time to wait for medics, no time to wait, and just boom, shoot him straight to the hospital. And, I'm sure the details, I don't want to, names or anything like that, but it was just, people can make all kinds of jokes about, certain small towns, certain whatever, or some people work in jobs where they're never, and you know what? You never know when it's going to hit. You don't know how you're going to perform until, and every guy that was tested there Friday night, I mean, for one, how they delivered was unbelievable, and for 2, or Thursday night, and for 2, I mean, the fact that when you look at the amount of just firepower, bombs, pipe bombs, things that were thrown, things that were detonated, and none of the guys in town got hit. The one T police officer, guys responded right to him, got him straight to the hospital. I mean, in a small town like that, no civilian was hit, no baby was hit, no any of this kind of stuff. And to have a guy, I mean, the first officer on scene, he just radios it in. 2 guys get out of the car and just unload firepower into his vehicle. He throws it in reverse, and Joe's okay. Like, I mean, it's really mind-blowing. And I'm just so proud of the guys that were part of it.
Once again, we're chatting with Kevin Macdonald here on AM 1460 WXBR, Watertown resident, Watertown firefighter. I mentioned at the top of the interview, you're a well-respected mixed martial arts referee who is refereed at some large events, even put on by the UFC, the premier outfit in mixed martial arts. Let me ask you this. Suspect number 1, Tamlan Tsarnaev, was a former amateur boxer who trained at Wai-kru. Wai-kru is more well known for being in mixed martial arts school as opposed to a boxing school. Did you have any knowledge of who he was prior to the events of early Friday morning?
No, it's funny. I knew you were, as soon as you started saying, I knew you were going to go there. No, I had no contact with him. I know the guys at Wai-kru. I obviously, referee for them. I rolled there, when their fighters fight. I read an interview with John Howard, who's, one of the premier fighters out of there, and, he talked about, breaking his nose and breaking one of his ribs in the past. So I have no idea. What I'm hearing is that he sparred there boxing-wise, but I never, from what I know, saw him, interacted with him, anything like that.
That story came up earlier on the show, and we chatted with Sean Farley, a well-respected boxing trainer out of Intense 978 MMA and boxing, which has an affiliation with Wai-kru. So it's nice to get some validity to that story. You've heard it as well. Yeah,
and and I'm glad that the story didn't go with legs. I mean, at the end of the day, these people, however it plays out, I mean, they try to assimilate into our culture, and I don't know whether these guys just turned bad or if they were part of a cell. I have no idea, but I mean, when you hear, like, I even saw something on the news, and they're saying these guys were going to class and going to parties, in between the bombing and Friday. They said that one of them swiped their thing because they went swimming at the college complex like the day before. I mean, one of the scariest things is, who knows? I mean, there could have been some people that ran into this person and didn't even know it. There could, you don't know. You just got to keep your eyes and ears open, and, it's frightening.
Having worked in the mixed martial arts world myself, I'm in the same boat as you, Kevin. I never had any contact with him in the past that I'm aware of, but at the same time, you see news reports popping up of people that you and I both know very well who had direct contact with this guy for a long time.
Yeah.
Really?
And hopefully it'll just, again, boxing, kickboxing, mixed martial arts, they're worldwide sports. There's places where people go all the time. I'm very glad that I haven't seen anything where they've tried to attack any particular sport and lynch, as much as the media likes to reach. Appears that's not the case. It's these guys are being looked at as for who and what they are.
And what they are is complete scumbags, and that's what we'll look at them as.
Yeah.
AM 1460 WXBR. Kevin Macdonald joining us here on the program. Watertown firefighter, resident. I want to thank you so much for coming on the program today. I mentioned you're a mixed martial arts referee as well. I look forward to seeing you May 18th in Maine when New England Fights runs at the Androscoggin Bank Coliseum. You and I always say hello at those events. Kevin, before I let you go, any final words? Yeah, that is a nice plug. And by the way, thank you for mentioning plug, because I would also like people to know if they are in fact interested in becoming a licensed mixed martial arts referee, you got to go to KevinTheRef.com. You run a lot of seminars, some right within our listening demographic. I remember you did one at the Shaw Center in Brockton not too long ago. So, Kevin, I urge people to check out KevinTheRef.com as well. Thank you for coming on the show. Any final words?
No, I just, it's been a wild roller coaster, and I'm just so glad a new week starts now. And Boston strong. I'd love to say what Big Papi said, but I don't want to get you guys fined, but it's awesome being from here.
Well, we did just get the dump button last week. Perhaps we would have had our first use of it had Kevin Macdonald been more irresponsible. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll step aside for a quick break. Back with more of the program after this local news update.